Hello everyone, and you're very welcome back to my podcast for the very first time in 2026. We have a few things to catch you up on before we get into today's very exciting episode. So you may notice the podcast has a new name, and I promise this is the last time for a while. It took me a while to settle on a name, and I've gone with the new era. Obviously era meaning a new period of time, and it's also spin on ÉIRE-RA meaning Ireland as Gaeilge. So hopefully I'll be sticking with this one for a little bit. I've been spending a bit of time trying to find a name that fits. So hopefully this will be good as we kick off season 2 of the podcast. So for 2026, I'm hoping and aiming to do a podcast a month. Hoping. We all know how well that went last time, but I've started off strong. I've got a guest for the first podcast, and I'll get into that in a minute. But hopefully a podcast a month, maybe even more if I'm feeling adventurous, or as many as I can. But for this first episode, I'm joined by Alan O'Brien, who many of you, if you follow me on TikTok and social media, will know as a commentator for Cobh Ramblers, among many other different things. He's also a League of Ireland vlogger like myself, and I thought who better to kick off the season with me than Alan, because I wanted to get the lowdown on what was happening with Cobh Ramblers in the off season, and even better to look back at those last few weeks of the 2025 season where Treaty faced Cobh in the playoffs. Obviously, spoiler alert, went very well for Treaty and not so well for Cobh. But we looked back at all that. Among other things, we looked at the pre-season friendlies coming up in the next few weeks for both teams. We looked at some of the departures and signings in the off-season. And like I said, we looked at the playoffs as well. So I really hope you enjoy this podcast episode, whether you're listening or whether you're watching. Subscribe, like, follow, rate, whatever you want to do. And I'm also very open to comments as well. Let me know what you think and which guests you want on next. But for now, let's hop into the episode. For those who maybe aren't familiar with you, I know you've a good following online from junior vlogs and stuff like that, but for those that aren't kind of used to the podcast section, tell us who you are.
So my name's Alan O'Brien, and I am the lead commentator for Cobh Ramblers on LOI TV. So I commentate all of Cobh Ramblers' home games, anything that happens in St. Colman's Park. Perfect.
And you also do a little bit on TikTok as well, so I hear.
Little bit of TikTok in here and there, just doing some match day vlogs and stuff. But yeah, just a nice little side gig on the side there, as well as the commentary to go along with it.
Yeah, and that's actually how we got to know each other, was through TikTok, funny enough. So if you want to maybe tell people how we got to know each other, it was through TikTok DM when Trinity first played Cobh this season.
It was back, what was that? Was that May or June-ish time, I think?
Yeah, April, May, I think.
Yeah, and I was, as I do, sort of preparing for the games, and I was writing out all the names of the Treaty players, and I was looking up pronunciations, and then they were different to the pronunciations that I kind of heard Jason on the TikTok or on Treaty's LOI TV broadcast. So I was like, should probably confirm these and make sure that, because I like to be accurate, and I like to say the right names and make sure that I'm giving everyone the respect to actually try and pronounce their name correctly. So I was like, who do I know in Treaty? I'm following Emma there. She's involved with Treaty United. Sure, yeah, I'll give her a shout there and just see, Emma, how do you pronounce Boivy and Verlicek and all these guys? So yeah, that's kind of how it came to be. And then fast forward on a couple of months, and you were joining me in St. Colman's Park doing a bit of commentary yourselves. So I think we reckoned at the time it was the first men's LOI TV game where it was somebody from either club being represented in the commentary booth. So yeah. That's pretty much
and
it.
A blossoming friendship ever since, you could say.
Exactly that.
Yeah, and lots of the jokes as well to go along with that. I'm sure we'll get into them as the podcast goes on. But I suppose we'll even go back. We'll skip through the season. It's long gone now. We're into 2026. People don't want to be hearing about last season too much, but kind of on until next season. But you mentioned there that I joined you for commentary in St. Colman's Park for the last, I suppose, league match between Treaty and Cobh down in St. Colman's Park in September. And it wasn't a nice night for Treaty, let's just say that. And it was a 3-0 defeat, and one of the rainiest nights in the League of Ireland, I think, last season. It was bucketing it down St. Colman's Park, would never happen in the Markets Field. But it was a hard night, and I remember telling you that night, and I think I did say it on commentary that night as well, that I didn't think Treaty were going to make the playoffs at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, from the previous time that Cobh played Treaty in the Markets Field, it seemed like Treaty United season went into free fall. They jumped out of the plane and realised the parachute had a hole in it. But And I think like it was that game against Cobh that sort of seemed to be a little bit of a turning point, that the results sort of came back after that. I don't know, was it injuries? And I don't know, did the squad kind of change a little bit after that game? But like, I remember we were watching that night and Treaty looked hopeless. Like they were.
The rain didn't help.
Yeah, the rain didn't help. But, particularly like, because the first game in St. Coleman's Park, I thought that was one of the best performances by an away side I had seen visiting St. Coleman's Park. Like, I thought, Treaty dominated the share of possession. The chances probably were fairly even, and it was a tight game in the night. But it was a night and day performance compared to the second game in St. Coleman's Park, where Cobh just looked leagues ahead of Treaty on the night. And like Dylan McGlade absolutely running the show. He got 2 goals that night. I think they were his first goals for Cobh as well. That was one of the nights where Cobh were really on song, and you thought, wow, yeah, they're a really, really good side. They're going to be a challenge to anyone.
And at that stage, Dundalk hadn't won the league yet, I don't think, and you still had a chance to catch them at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, Dundalk only wrapped up the league in the second last game of the season, which I think was probably to Cobh's detriment that the title fight went on that long, because Cobh were sort of fighting for their life every week in the last kind of 8-9 games of the season, where they were always almost there. Even actually throughout the season, they were almost there. They'd get to within 2 points, and then they'd fall back a little bit, and they'd get to within a point, and then they'd fall back, and they never managed to get over the hump of getting past Dundalk. But it did mean that, like, even though like everyone sort of knew from probably about 8 games out that Dundalk were going to win it, Cobh had to be there just in case. And it meant that like they probably couldn't switch focus into the playoffs, and every game sort of became a cup final. And when you're under that sort of sustained pressure for that long, it does take it out of a squad. And I think that's what sort of happened towards the end.
Yeah, whereas Treaty had the opposite struggle in that they were slipping from the playoffs week by week somehow, and I don't really know how we kept that 5th place for a good few weeks leading into kind of September time. And it was just lucky that people, I say, below Treaty were dropping points. But it really, and I think I said it to you that night in Cobh, that Wexford, and at that stage Wexford, Finn Harps and Longford were on Treaty's backs, and we didn't know who was going to chase us. And we had some titanic tussles left in the league at that stage with Bray, and we just had Cobh, and we had a few ones left, and we always knew Wexford was going to be the massive challenge at the end of the season. So it was really, we knew Cobh was going to be there, but Cobh they seemed to kind of lose a little bit of momentum at the end of the season, in terms of like Longford seemed to be a sticky team towards the end of the season, both for Treaty and for Cobh.
Yeah, Longford suddenly found form at the end of the year. I think they strung about 3 or 4 wins together at the end. And, they were 8th or 9th, and they were sort of barely hanging on to the rest of the pack. And then suddenly they strung a few wins together, and it's like, whoa, they're suddenly playoff contenders now. And, if there was 1 or 2 more games left in the season, I think we could be talking about Longford in the playoffs instead of Treaty. And I suppose it's just unfortunate for them, fortunate for Treaty that's how it worked out. But full credit to Treaty, they, when the chips were down, they picked themselves up, and the performances picked up, and they carried a wave of momentum into the playoffs.
Yeah, I remember it was our last league home game of the season. It was against Bray Wanderers, and it was Johansson with the goal. I think it was the only goal. I think it was a 1-0. It's so long ago now, I can't even remember. There were some mad matches towards the end of the season. They've all blurred into one. And I thought, and I remember posting on TikTok saying, is this the last hurrah at the Markets Field? Just kind of as a joke, but I was like, we actually did get the win over Bray. This is interesting, because I feel like a lot of the teams are already confirmed into the playoff kind of down tools towards the end of the season when we're saving their squads for the playoffs. But then it was our last league game of the season. It was away to Wexford, and I don't think Treaty had won against Wexford since maybe 2 seasons beforehand. For some reason, Ferrycarry Park seems to be Treaty's bogey side and bogey ground, and we just had some colossal losses. We seemed to just fall apart down in Wexford. We just forget how to kick a ball in Wexford. But I was actually in Cobh watching it. I was down at Cobh versus Dundalk, because I thought that's when they were going to lift the trophy. And I was actually with you, just at the very end, I remember. But I was watching it in Wexford on my phone. I had no interest in Cobh versus Dundalk, and and all of a sudden, I think it was Patrick Ferry and Mark Byrne. They got those goals, and we were quietly celebrating once over in the Dundalk end and once over by the tea shop in St Comas Park. We were both like, "Yeah!" Me and my friend that was with me at the time, because it just seemed so unreal that Trini were going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, the momentum had just gone out of the side, and I don't know what happened. I don't know where they found it from, but they picked themselves back up again. And I mean, on a couple of runs of games, just can swing a season like that. And what looked absolutely hopeless, suddenly they were riding a huge wave of momentum and carried that through. And that's probably the best way to go into playoffs. Is you've just about made it, you've strung a couple of wins together, and suddenly you start to feel invincible. It's like, yeah, we know how to win games, and success breeds success, and that's what happened into the playoffs.
I suppose getting into the playoffs, because it was just such a mad, like 2-ish weeks, or even a week it happened, I think, at the end of the season in October. We knew it was going to be Cobh the whole way through, and we said to each other down in St Comas Park that time that it would be me against you, essentially, going into the playoffs, and that Treaty would meet Cobh once again for what was now going to be 6 times throughout the season, between the home ties and the away ties and then the playoffs. And I think we kind of all expected Treaty to not come out on top. Just they had those few wins, but just given the past performances against Cobh that season, obviously we had the win down at Marksfield, but we fell apart the first game of the season towards the end of that game, and then those ties down in St Comas Park weren't great for Treaty, but I think Treaty got the advantage in having the home game first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously going to come at this from a Cobh perspective, so I want to preface anything I say first by saying full credit to Treaty. I think
that's what you're here to do, Alan. Balance views and all that.
But I don't think anyone can deny that Treaty deserved it over the 2 legs. I think they were the better team over the 2 legs, and I think everyone will say fair enough to that. But yeah, I mean, you look at the games during the season, though. I mean, Treaty had the win in the Markets Field. They should have won the game on the opening day of the season, realistically. Just capitulated from the 80 odd minute. And
into free fall.
and then the first game in St. Coleman's Park was a close game. I mean, it was 1-1. I think Cobh took the lead in the first half. There was an own goal. I mean, Cobh weren't really creating a lot of chances, but it was the most clinical that they've probably been in any performance that season, that they took the few chances that they got that night. So, I mean, it probably shouldn't have been as clear-cut as it was. I mean, that the last St. Coleman's Park game, the last regular game of the season between the two, was probably the outlier in terms of performances. So, I mean, nobody really should have been expecting it to be that straightforward for Cobh. And yeah, I mean, it turned out not to be, I suppose.
Yeah, so for those that maybe don't follow either team, and I'm just coming at this from a neutral League of Ireland perspective, the first tie, I think, was on the Friday. It was Treaty versus Cobh, obviously, at the Marks Field. And I think it was Johansson again that got that goal. Johansson turned into a Ballon d'Or contender towards the end of the season. He didn't produce goals in the season itself, but the last few weeks he saved Treaty's playoff run, essentially. And I think there was a little bit of hope.
2 goals he got.
I think he got one against Bray as well, that fateful night where Stephen Healy got sent off in the 20th minute for possibly the worst red card given by a referee throughout the season, because it was blatantly not even a foul or anything like that. And then we went on to somehow get a lead, and then Bray scored in the last kick of the game. I think he did score the winner or the equaliser before that. So I think that was his 3rd goal, and then it was against Bray again. He seemed to like scoring against Bray. But it was the first time when I was around the Blue Army that night, which is Treaty United's fan group, and there was a little bit of hope, I think, for the first time, that we're heading down St. Coleman's Park on Tuesday, and we have a lead, a very slim lead, but it was a lead. So what happened for Cobh, I suppose, that night? What was their vibes going into the Tuesday game?
I mean, I think watching that game, it looked like a team that the energy was just sapped out of. And I spoke about it a little bit there, but yeah, I mean, it felt like that was a team that was just fatigued, that everything was just a little bit off. The touch was a little bit off. The passes were a little bit off. Stuff that had been clicking all season just wasn't quite there. I don't want to single anyone out, but I mean, Dylan McGlades, who is normally such a spark of life and is such a fantastic player and is so full of skills and so full of tricks and loves to take on a player and loves to beat them and will beat them. He just got shackled that evening by Evan O'Connor, which was just really unlike him from everything that we had seen so far that season. So I think it was the weight, I think, of trying to keep the pace with Dundalk, that it actually would have been better for them if Dundalk had wrapped up the title a little bit earlier instead of Dundalk dropping quite
Dundalk's
a few points. Dundalk's to blame. I'm putting it all on Dundalk.
I'll also blame Dundalk.
But, I mean, if Dundalk had... Because they dropped a lot of points in the final rotation of games, that, if they had wrapped up the title a little bit earlier and allowed Cobh to switch focus, probably would have been better off for Cobh in the playoff picture. Because they just weren't where they needed to be in terms of energy. And not even effort, but just that sharpness was missing from the team, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was... Treaty was actually, I think, one of the better performances. When I say better, but one of the more exciting performances. They definitely wanted it. Whether it was one of the most clinical performances I've ever seen from Treaty, probably not. But it definitely was exciting, and it drew the Markets Field crowd to St. Coleman's Park on another wet, cold St. Coleman's Park evening on the following Tuesday. But I think Treaty knew coming in that it was going to be a slim lead, and that Cobh, especially in their home ground, could very well get the better of them. But for the most part, Treaty held on until the last minute of normal time.
Yeah, I think it was something that Cobh have had to contend with all year, was teams coming to St. Coleman's Park and sitting very low, playing for a draw, which is all Treaty you needed on the night, was to they did not lose the game. And they set themselves up really well. They were really organised, very, very difficult to break down. I can't really remember many clear-cut chances from that game where you're like, should have been pulled ahead, should have been dead and buried. They were very well organised, very well structured, very sound defensively, which is exactly what they needed. But yeah, it took all of, I think, about 94 minutes, and then Matthew Whelan on the turn strained my vocal cords with that one. I was recovering for a couple of days afterwards. But yeah, I mean, a huge moment. What could have been a turning point in the season. But again, have to give credit to Treaty, because that could have been the goal that undid everything. And, that could have been the goal that they dropped their heads and, capitulated entirely. But, they came out into extra time that they weren't expecting. And were probably the stronger side throughout extra time as well. And then Owen Martin popped up with the winner, and Deja Vu, that's all she wrote. But, I mean, it's one of the best clips, I think, is you have of Stephen Healy on the sideline when the goal went in. I love that video, seeing his reaction, because he was right there with, I think,
I'll insert it here for the video format. Someone can see the screenshot of Stephen. But yeah, I don't know what it was like. Obviously, we could hear Cobh and St. Coleman's Park blow up when that goal was scored in the 94th. But on the Treaty side, the small corner we had of St. Coleman's Park, it felt like a death. It felt like a heartbreak. We were all thinking, that's it. We thought we had it for 90 plus minutes, and all of a sudden it was gone. And it's a familiar story for Treaty fans to, when something like that happens, or a half, usually it's when a break happens in the game for 15 or so minutes, that Treaty come out a different side on the other side, and it's usually a worse side, because I've said throughout the season that it would be better if Treaty sometimes could play a full 90 minutes with no break, because they could keep the momentum they had. But it was a different Treaty side that I saw come out on the side of that extra time, because for once it seemed energetic. It was messy, but it was energetic, because they had the Treaty crowd behind them, I think, for that first half. And Fionn Doherty went from being a left back to a centre forward, and was challenging the keeper all the time. And everyone was screaming and shouting, and go Stephen, go Fionn, go Ben, go this, go that. And it was just, and then to see, I didn't even see Owen Martin's goal go in, I won't lie. It was the end of their end, and I was looking the other way, as I usually do. And I see Evan O'Connor turn around and go up to the fans, and he was, and it was just, I was like, oh my God, we scored a goal and it's come from a defender and it hasn't even come from the front. And it was just, you can see, and if anyone wants to see, they can see the clips on my blogs of me and my friend Greg and my friend Chloe and Paddy from the podcast. We were having a ball over there because we've actually done it. But I think a lot of the time for Treaty then it was hold on for that extra few minutes that after we scored the goal, it looked like we weren't going to hold on to it, and the ref did not want to blow up that game for Treaty. It seemed to go on forever, and we were certainly giving out about it. But and you said there, to even see the player's face when the Cobh goal went in, Stephen He turned around and went gobsmacked, because we all, even the players, thought that's it.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure somebody in the crowd was looking up where the final was going to be as it ticked past the 90th minute. But thanks, Matthew Whelan. You prolonged it for a little bit. Unfortunately, only a stay of execution. But I mean, that's what makes the league exciting, isn't it? That's why we love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, full credit to Treaty. They could have crumbled, and they didn't. They held strong and found that winner and found the way. And I mentioned about what Cobh's, to my sort of perception, lack of energy, and extra time probably wasn't what they needed. They probably needed to try and get it done into the 90 because they just didn't have the legs after a long, hard season to get it done in extra time.
Yeah, and it probably didn't maybe benefit Cobh that he maybe had a few players missing towards the end of the season in terms of injuries and stuff like that. And a lot of our players who were missing mid-season through injury came back towards the end of the season, in Carl O'Sullivan and Leisure Lynch and players like that who definitely benefited us in terms of the playoffs. And look, we'll skip past that playoff final because no one wants to hear about it. Treaty succumbed to another 90 plus minute winner in Athlone to I can't even pronounce his name, Justin whatever, and scored a bicycle kick nonetheless in front of me, and I said, that's it now, we're gone. But for Treaty, I suppose, to get as long as they were, it was unexpected, but set the high standard for next season, let's say that much. But for Cobh, I think it's an even higher standard that they may want to go up next season. Yeah,
I mean, I think looking at who Cobh have signed, who Cobh have retained, there's a very strong cohort of players who are going to be there. It's sort of kicked off with Luca Leberve being offered his first multi-year professional contract, and I think that's a huge statement. Luca was a massive loss when he went out. He was struggling. It was a wrist injury that he picked up in week
against
2.
Kerry.
Against Kerry, yeah.
Early, or very second game in the season, I think.
Yeah, it was the first home game that he just had an awkward landing when he went up for a header, and he fractured a bone in his wrist, and it got to a point where it was either going to have surgery or it was going to have long-term implications for him. So yeah, elected to have the surgery, but it did mean the end of his season. And that coincided with Shane Griffin, the number 23, the midfielder, the non-captain Shane Griffin, just to specify.
Cobh, like Treaty, have a lot of repeat names.
I know, I can't complain about it too much when there's 2 people with the exact same name. But
yeah, he had that, and we had a Mark Walsh, a Mark Byrne. We had a Lee J Lynch, a Robbie Lynch, a Ben Lynch. We had a Ben Lee, a Ben Lynch. We had a Lee Devitt, a Lee J Lynch. We had a lot of repeats. So ye, like us, had a weird, and it's only happening again this season. We have another Ben now as well thrown into the mix and everything like that. So it's happening again.
I think I do remember from commentary where Lynch passed to Lynch, passed to Lynch. So
yeah,
I mean, it made it easier for me though that if I didn't spot the number of who it was, then I just said Lynch.
It had to be one of them.
You've got a 3 in 11 chance of being right. That's almost a quarter odds.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, Griffin going out with injury as well was huge, and I think people maybe didn't comment on it as much at the time. But he finished the season having only played 3 quarters of it with 9 goals and 9 assists. You take a talisman like that out of your team, and that's really going to affect performance and really affect how you play. So I mean, he was a huge loss, and he came on for a couple of minutes in that. In the playoffs, but had to go back off again because he just wasn't right. They tried to make it work, and it just wasn't ready to come back. But he signed on for next season, which is a huge re-signing as well, and definitely somebody that I'm excited to see back in St. Coleman's Park.
It's funny you mentioned Luca because ye started with your left back and we also started with our left back at Treaty. Ben Lynch was the first re-signing for Treaty, and I think a solid re-signing because Ben Lynch was kind of crucial to Treaty's season in the end. He was always a solid. I think he only missed 2 or 3 games. The whole season, one of them actually was that 3-0 in Cohen's Park, so maybe I do put a bit of blame on Ben Lynch for not being available for that game, but I'm sure he won't hold it against me. But because he did give out to me for mentioning him on comms, I was like, you got mentioned 5 minutes beforehand if you listened before. But anyway, we started with Ben Lynch, but also if people read into the article, they would have thought that Ben Lee is also re-signed, but he was announced on a multi-year contract, so he's still young. But there seems to be, it's like I mentioned the other day in a TikTok comment, it seems to be a tilting point for Trudy. We kind of don't know whether it's going to be a bad season or a good season based off these signings, because I'm just looking at them here. We have Fionn Doherty, who we saw can play in multiple positions towards the end of the season. Colin Conroy, obviously kind of a mainstay. Him and Stephen Healy seem to swap out for each other a lot in that midfield this season. Darren Owanko and Rich Cobh, they're back as well. We didn't get to see much of Darren last season through injury and stuff like that, but Rich Covery kind of came into his own towards, I suppose, the end of the season and was crucial. Ben Lynch, Ben Lee, Robbie Lynch, a massive re-signing. I think he was really crucial, and he seemed to come out with a moment or so every season where he just does unbelievable goal line block, and he had one of them again this season. And then in recent days, we've seen Mark Walsh, the captain, come back as well, which is his 6th season at Treaty. He's been here since the beginning, so good to have that old head and experience there. And then I think 3 signings that people were happy to see were Mark Byrne coming back on that left wing, who's probably going to be having to pick up those goals that Lee Devitt has left behind, and Stephen Healy and Brian Cunningham. Brian, kind of like Luca, got riddled with injury towards the end of the season and had to get surgery. So hopefully he'll hit the ground running, because he did hit the ground running for the 2 games or so that he got to play for Treaty in the summer. But that's going to be a real issue for Treaty, it seems, Alan, is goals.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've mentioned it in blogs previously that, you had Lee Devitt, who had a breakout season in terms of goals. Like, that's out of the norm for him to hit those sort of figures. And it was a very sharp tail off after that in where the goals were coming from. And then lost Yo-Yo Maddie, Tripmer Velicek's after going. So where are those goals going to come from? Where are you going to replace those? And, very good signing so far for Treaty. But mostly in the defensive end of things. We have
a full back line and more if they want it. And I'll pop up on the video version. I have like a rough football pitch graphic of positions and stuff like that. And it seems to be lacking on that right wing. Carlos Sullivan, haven't heard hide nor hair of where he is or where he's going at the moment, but there's a full back line, they're prepped. There's 3 in the midfield. We have a winger in Mark Byrne, and a lot of the signings up top are new. Obviously Brian Cunningham can play up the top as well, but interesting signings. There've definitely been mixed opinions on them. Cian Curtis coming from Bray Wanderers seems to be decent enough. Eric Euro coming from Longford, which will be an interesting one, but it seems to fancy himself a yellow card. I think he got 13 last season.
I believe Cian Curtis was something similar. I think he ended up with about 17 or 18. So, yeah.
Unbelievable. And then an interesting one, and definitely well received by the fans, was Jack Brady returning to Treaty United. He played, I think, in the 22-23 season before poor Corey Chambers came in. We'll talk about Corey in a minute. And then obviously one, I don't think Treaty expected the reception to this one, especially as the Christmas Day announcement signing, was Ben Feeney. I'm not going to unpack what came with that. I'm sure people can do their own research on what happened with him. But it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Let's just say that much. Maybe they should have saved Robbie Lynch for the Christmas Day signing, in my opinion. But to go in, so hopefully they'll pick up some of the goals, especially because a good few of them are forward signings. And you've Brian Cunningham, Mark Byrne definitely picked up the goals towards the end of the season. Haven't heard a few of them coming back yet, but on the departure sides, it's been a hard hitter, I think, for Treaty. We mentioned Tripmer Velicek there, who, God, you gotta love Trip, big man Trip, as everyone used to call him on the comms.
Yeah, I mean, Trip is, he, even more than the goals as well, though, just a big physical presence. I mean, it may not be lighting up the stat sheet, but, if you're just a big fella like that, he's going to bully defenders and just give them a tough time. And, maybe you just knock the wind out of a fella a little bit, that you can allow those other players to thrive around you. We can often delve into goals and assists and stats and XG and all this sort of stuff, but there's a lot to be said for the intangibles, and I think that's something that that trip really brought to Treaty, was just that sort of strength and character.
Yeah, and someone I don't know if I've missed it or if it's yet to come is Nico Kozlowski, and that's someone I mentioned a lot when I was on commentary with you, Alan. He's someone I got to see kind of come up from this academy to seniors, and honestly, he's a joy to watch, because I've always said it's like someone has sellotaped the ball to his foot, and he loves, and I won't name the Cobh defender who gave me the information, but he likes to make fun of defenders, and he does it quite brilliantly at times. So he's a hard one to play against for sure. So hopefully he'll be coming back too.
Yeah, hopefully for Treaty side. I know he popped up with a crucial goal there against UCD, that injury time winner. Yeah, I remember doing the research on Treaty, and that was a really unusual one, because I think the vast majority of the games that he played for Treaty last year, he was coming off the bench. Never really got the run in the starting lineup, and you do question why. Like,
I questioned it a lot.
I mean, it wasn't that there wasn't the space. There wasn't a striker there who was hammering in double-figure goals. So why was he not given the opportunity?
Mm-hmm. It's hard to know, because I think he has that bit of, I suppose, technicality to him, and a bit of skill. And I think that bit of kind of Neymar, that little bit of tactical skill
is just, there's a magic.
So, something about him is just he likes to make fun of defenders, and I won't out the Cobh defender that told me it, but I'll tell you off camera. But like, talking about those departures as well, we've obviously lost a former one of you who came to us, and then we've lost him to you again, which is Corey.
Yeah, man. I would like to take this time to formally apologise to Jodie for stealing her favourite Treaty United player and bringing him back to Cobh. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. She's found a new player. Ben Lynch, you're the one who picked, chosen one for the season. So carry on.
But yeah, I mean, Corey is an interesting signing. Obviously, he was based in Cork previously, because when Treaty signed him, he came from College Corinthians, one of the Munster Senior League sides here. So, I mean, is it? Because I suppose it's the thing with League of Ireland, people can often think of it similar to the Premier League, that players are free and able to move around very willingly, but that's very often not the case. And I don't know where Corey's sort of home base is, but maybe it is kind of a move back to Cork to be closer to home, is it closer to a job, or is it to be closer to family or something like that? I'm not too sure, but look, good to have him back. He's a very solid keeper, and definitely grown in the last few years since he previously left Cobh. So yeah, definitely be an interesting one there.
Yeah, he definitely kind of came into himself. If we say Joe saved our playoff season on one end, it was definitely Corey that saved it on the other end. Certainly came into his own. And just last one, maybe on departures from the tree side, when we get into Cobh in a minute, is Evan O'Connor to Athlone Town, which is an interesting move. And I've put the reason he's gone down is he's from the Midlands. He's maybe closer to home up in Athlone. But to go to a team that maybe struggled last season, I know they've been making some signings in the off season. Hopefully will be a bit stronger. It's an interesting move for someone that seemed to get on so well at Treaty and to be that mainstay right back position.
Again, that's another one that I think you're putting down to geographical reasons, because Evan was definitely one of Treaty's standout players. He was absolutely a standout player in that playoff game in St. Cohen's Park. Was electric on the night, was absolutely fantastic. But I mean, yeah, that move to Athlone, he's a player that you would have expected to be looking up rather than down the league table, and could a Premier Division team have been interested in him, even because that was the level that he was performing at. So a move to Athlone, they were way off the pace last season. It strikes me as a funny one, but he's going to be a brilliant signing for Athlone, because he is going to bring a level of quality to that side.
I just touched on there on Treaty's departures. Obviously, there's a few more there for Treaty in sense of Valley Jolia and Matt Boyle and everything like that. And I'm sure there's probably more to come, unfortunately, because I did really like last year's squad. But on the Cobh front, you've lost one or two to Cork.
Yeah, it's only been the one to Cork so far. It's only been Niall O'Keefe, but yeah, Niall had a very, very good season in the middle of the park. Not flashy, but played that midfield disruptor role really well, broke up anything that was coming through, and just did the simple thing so well that broke up any attacks, passed the ball off, allowed the creative players to have their flair. And like that type of player, especially in the modern game, is so important that you allow the flair players to do their thing because you're covering their defensive duties. And he won man of the match at least once. He was really really good. So he's going to be a loss, and there's no two ways about that one. We do have Rhys Gordy, who was signed mid-season, our Flying Scot, who sort of played in that role as well, in that sort of in the 4-2-3-1, playing in that two, the defensive sort of minded midfielders. And Rhys is an exceptional player, really really good. I was very very happy to see that he was coming back because it looked for a time like he wouldn't be. So really really happy that he's back in the squad for this year. So there is a like for like replacement there with Rhys, but yeah, he's the only one so far that has been lost to City. Touch wood. You don't want that City squad getting too much stronger. But I mean, then the big ones really. Barry Coffey is on his way out the door. Where he ends up, there's rumours abounds. I've heard Premier Division clubs sniffing around from. I have heard elsewhere that he's looking overseas, that he could be off to Australia or to America. Time will tell with that one, but unfortunately it doesn't look like he's going to be at St. Colman's Park, and he's going to be a massive loss. It's 26, 27 goals that you're going to have to find to try and replace him. He was the standout player of the first division last season, and he's going to be a big loss.
Yeah, and you said to me the other day, signings slow enough on the Cobh front. They were coming thick and fast at the beginning, and they've hit a wall at the moment.
It slowed down a little bit in the last while. I suppose the last big one though was Wilson Waweru. He was on loan at Cobh in that 2023 season where they finished third, hit double figures for that season. And then he was on loan from Galway, moved to Sligo, has had a couple of seasons in the Premier Division. Announced that he was leaving, and as soon as he was announced that he was leaving, I know that the lads were straight on looking for him, because the rumour was that he was going to go up north, maybe play in the Northern Irish Premier Division, but I think Cobh have tempted him to run back 2023. I know the fans are hugely excited about it. Just one of those players who really endeared himself, and I know they say that don't fall in love with a lone player, but he was one of those guys that you just can't help but love. Proven in the division, proven with the club, working under Fran Rocket again, who would have been the assistant manager back then, is now the main man in the dugout. So I think there's going to be high hopes for him that he'll be able to at least recoup some of the tally that Barry Coffey's left behind.
And of course, that's another point for Cobh. There's a new management team there. I think I was actually at the game where Mick McDermott left. It's not a change one for Treaty. It's still Tommy Barrett at the helm for Treaty. But how do you think that one's going to go down for Cobh?
I suppose it's good in a way that Fran knows the club. He was there as assistant manager under Shane Keegan. I had the chance to interview him when he was announced, and he's confident about it. He's very confident that has had some good mentorship, and he's ready to step up and take the main job. He's got Conor Mead there as well, who's coming as director of football. So, I think Cobh have been really good in terms of putting a good support structure, a good background structure, and a good management team in place there. So, and it's people that the fans are going to get behind as well. They're Cobh lads. They played with Cobh. They know the club, know the community. That I think that's so important, is to have people who get what the club is about.
And you actually mentioned there, and it brings me perfectly on to my next point, was the Northern Irish League. And there's a player that's well known at Treaty that used to play in that Northern Irish League, and that is Lee J. Lynch. And of course we kind of have to touch on him very briefly as to who knows what's going on with him at the moment.
I mean, he will be a huge loss for Treaty. He is one of the midfield talisman, but I mean, I've heard, I don't know how true this is, I'm going purely off rumours, that he wanted to be Limerick sporting director but still play with Treaty, and that seems mental.
From what I'm hearing is he won't be allowed back to Treaty, because, and it is quite obvious, and I'm sure Lee knew this himself, it's a conflict of interest.
100%.
When you're trying to take talent from maybe one side into a different side, but Lee J, he did play for Limerick back in the day. He's Limerick rooted in that sense, and he came back to Treaty there in summer before last to play for Treaty. but we've touched on it many times during the season, Alan, that Treaty looked a different side without Lige.
Yeah, and particularly that game, the first St. Coleman's Park game, it was, you were saying that once Lige came off, that completely changed the tide and the momentum. He is a huge presence in that midfield, a hugely experienced presence. He's going to be a big loss on the pitch, for sure. But, it is the right decision for Treaty to not bring him back. I think if he is going to be Limerick FC sporting director, you can't have that, even just optically. I mean, what does that say about you as a club? If you're going to have one of your main players in your squad be the sporting director for another club, it was ludicrous that it was even suggested, to be perfectly honest. But
and it was kept well under wraps. So I think it definitely. I was producing a radio show in Limerick here the day it broke, in the morning it broke, and it turned a lot of heads, and it surprised a lot of people because it was kept well under wraps.
Yeah, I can imagine the shock waves and the ripple effect that sent through Limerick football. And Limerick FC have risen like a phoenix from the ashes and are making a lot of noise. So that was a statement from Limerick FC, to be able to poach a player like that, of that sort of caliber, is massive.
Yeah, and it's definitely a conversation we'll come back to on the podcast. Is there room for two clubs in Limerick, two senior League of Ireland clubs? And it's something I've actually talked with Lige about before for an interview, so I might have to bring that one back for that one. But just to very quickly touch as well, obviously, if Lige is not going to be there in the midfield, you're left with very few options at the moment, considering the re-signings. And obviously, we have a good amount to go until the season. I know Treaty were making signings up until the 1st of February last year, and the likes of Joe Hansen and Connor Wilson and those Canadian lads. And we haven't seen much of the Canadian involvement yet, so I'm sure we'll see that come in, especially with new marketing director Ian McMahon replacing Ciara McCormack. But again, stories for another time. We're looking back on the season here, is that we're left in the midfield at the moment with Colin Conroy, Ben Lee and Stephen Healy. And I know we had a bit of graft for Stephen Healy throughout the season, Alan.
Yeah, I on my TikTok made an away team of the season where I picked out my players who I felt performed the best against Cobh in St. Coleman's Park, and Stephen was right there as one of the players that I was going to include in it, and just about missed out. I think he's an exceptional player. He's an exceptional talent. I think as well with Stephen, it's the amount of energy he brings. That is huge in midfield, because you can be as technical as you want and as fantastic footballer as you want, but if you're not willing to put in the hard graft and put in the hard yards, then you're no good to me. Stephen is a player who is going to cover every single blade of grass, and you absolutely need those players in your squad. So to get him back, to sign him from Galway United is a real coup for Treaty United, and definitely somebody that they're going to hopefully look towards in this season in 2026. I suppose, it is the one thing is they are going to be missing a bit of experience. I know Stephen's only 21. Ben Lee, I think, is of similar
19.
age, usually 19. Colin Conroy is quite young as well, as far as I can recall. So
3, I think.
And, that's 3 midfield players. You're probably going to want to have a little bit more for squad depth, which I know was not a problem with Treaty United last season. It was making my squad list last year, and I was extending onto a second page to fit all the Treaty United lads in. So I didn't have to do it for any other club. But, you do perhaps just miss a bit of experience there of lads who, are going to be well able to deal with the muck and bullets.
The Carls and your Liges.
Just those guys who know what playing in the division is about. That is maybe missing from Treaty United, and maybe that's something that they can rectify in the next kind of month and a half or so, but it remains to be seen.
And something we touched on there, I'd imagine, I haven't spoken to Stephen about it, but being on loan these past 2 seasons from Galway, having been part of the Galway team that got promoted that year, and then spending a bit of time on loan with Kerry and then with Treaty, and he's coming on a permanent deal now to Treaty, makes what happened, I suppose, to him in the last few weeks of the season a little bit pointless, in the fact that he got dropped because he was going back to Galway.
Yeah, I remember you saying that around the time that we were getting ready to prepare for our game on commentary, that Tommy was making these sort of decisions based on who was going to be there next season, and you were sort of looking, going, you're in 5th place, you're in the playoffs, and we're only about 3/4 of the way into the season. You've still got this season to focus on.
Yes.
And and was reduced the minutes for Stephen, and now that he's back, it's sort of like, well, why?
What was it about? Getting seemed to kind of put the claws into the ground and hold rather than maybe take a few risks and push on and putting those players on. And it happened with a lot of players, not just even just using his as an example, because I know it was kind of noticeable at the time that Colin Conroy was playing a lot more for him and he was dropped to the bench. And I suppose he came very well known around the league, as we said, for that red card, terrible refereeing decision at Bray Wanderers, possibly the worst, and set off a catalyst of red card decisions for that week that all got appealed, which was a really weird week for refereeing in the league. Going back, but he's definitely made a name for himself, but bit short in the midfielders. Defence, I think we seem to be okay, but it'd be interesting to see, like you said there, where the squad depth goes, because it was a massive squad last season.
Yeah, for sure. And it was a massive squad of lads who weren't really getting runs as well. I think a lot of the academy players, were they all actually involved with the senior squad? Because I'm just going off transfer market when I'm making my list of notes, and it's everyone who's gotten minutes for the team. But was it a couple of lads who were just getting a run out because you were short, and were they actually involved in the senior setup? I don't really know. But I mean, it was definitely bloated in terms of
too many cooks spoil the broth.
Yeah.
That's the way it ended up going, and it seems to be like, I'm looking at the little squad sheet I have of the positions, like defences. We've backup positions for every single position there, and maybe we need a right back. So Robbie Lynch out that right, but he's a centre back at heart, and 3 in the midfield, maybe 3 up top. Mark Byrne on the wing. We're missing a few wingers. We're missing a few players, so it would be interesting as well to see if that Canadian investment comes back again this season, because Ben Lee is the only one there at the moment. Like, would love to have I know he's American, Owen Martin back. Certainly saved the arses a few times throughout the season, especially against Cobh, and another one was against Dundalk, who came back to bite us very nicely in August after drawing with them all 3 times. But that's the story for another day.
I don't recall that one, Emma. Do you care to touch on that?
No, I seem to have erased that from my memory. I think it was like 7-0 or something like that. But anyway, moving swiftly on, I suppose just to chronologically move on, we're starting the pre-season games. Pre-season friendlies are on the way. We're only 6 weeks out from League of Ireland being back, which I'm sure everyone is really, really excited. It's come around very, very quickly. It feels like playoffs were just yesterday. And Alan, just tell us who's up for Cobh and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, so Cove's pre-season kicks off. They've got Waterford on Saturday, and that's going to be an interesting test. Waterford, obviously the team that finished 9th last season in the Premier Division. They were the playoff relegation candidates. Came through that game against Bray Wanderers. If Cobh had hit their form in the playoff, I mean, that would have been really, really interesting. I feel like, when Cobh were on song, especially like that game where they played against Bray and they put Bray to the sword fairly easily when it was 2-0 up in the Carlisle grounds, and you were like, Cobh were the second best team in the league. I know obviously didn't come through the playoffs, so I don't want to sound like it's sour grape saying this or whatever, but yeah.
Who was that against? Sorry, I can't recall who beat you, but
it's escaped my mind now. Yeah, look, that's last season. It's in the past. We won't dwell on it. But I mean, if it was straight 2nd versus 9th and there wasn't a playoff, I think Cobh probably would have had the squad there to really scare Waterford. So it's going to be an interesting test of where both squads are at with this pre-season friendly. And I know it's only a pre-season friendly. You don't have to read too much into it, but it's going to be a nice litmus test of, okay, how good are Waterford this season and what's their chances of survival like? And
the gap between the Premier and the first, see where it's at. Yeah,
and what's this Cobh squad shaking up like? Are they going to be in there in the mix, or what sort of season do we have in front of us? So you don't want to put too much into a pre-season friendly, but there is a little bit of interest there, all right, in terms of how the season's going to shake out.
I think the interesting one for Treaty is on the way this Friday, which hopefully this podcast will be up before the case. Is Treaty United versus Galway, or as I like to call it, Treaty United versus Lee Devitt. So we'll see.
I thought it was going to be the Stephen Healy derby, but yeah, cool.
Also that, the man from Galway. But it'll be interesting to see if Lee Devitt plays that game, and to see, might have a little, hopefully it's open door and I get to have a little sneaky peek at see who these trialists are, and see if I recognise any of them will be handy. But even not worth it to me otherwise, or else you'll be looking at FN Connection seeing T9, T7, T2. But hopefully we get to see some of the new players in action, and getting some some minutes for the ones that are returning. But it'd be interesting to see if Lee Devitt plays that game and to see how much of Treaty lost out on to Galway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone from Treaty can deny the fact that he's moved on. You know, he has gone on to bigger things into the Premier Division and had the sort of season where he's earned his chance to test his mettle in the Premier Division. So, you know, I don't think it's going to be a frosty reception. I think, you know, it'll be still well received back in Treaty, but yeah, it will be an interesting one to see how he fits into that dynamic of the Galway United squad.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And then for Treaty, then it's Kerry next Tuesday. Then we have the Munster Senior Cup in Ringmahon Rangers next week as well. And funnily enough, arranged for the day after the Munster Senior Cup, so I'm going to presume that's going to be moved, is Sligo Rovers for Treaty, which is going to be a very interesting lineup to see how that one goes down.
Yeah, I mean, unless they're just planning on wheeling out the academy lads or something for the Munster Senior Cup. I think if they do that, they're going to get a bit of a shock, because Ringmahon are in what is the de facto third tier at the moment of Munster Senior League, are a very, very strong side. A lot of League of Ireland experience. I commentated on them for the FAI Intermediate Cup final and for the Munster Senior League Keen Cup final. They're a really good squad, so they're definitely not a team that should be taken lightly.
No, absolutely not. And just very quickly looking ahead to that very exciting first game of the season. Who do Cobh have, Alan, and how do you feel about it?
So Cobh have Wexford in St. Coleman's Park. Funnily enough, it is the first time in 6 years that Cobh have a home game as their first game of the season.
Hey. Go Cobh.
What that means for the season, who knows? But
first time in a while not having Treaty as well.
Yeah, I thought they were going to make it a third time the charm, but no, Wexford to open the season. Wexford have made some noise in the off season. Actually, they've been making some good signings. I think they just announced who was it from Bray Wanderers? The name's just gone out of my head.
I know what you're on about. I'll pop it up on screen somewhere.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for bailing me out. Max Murphy, the left/right back who scored 11 goals last season, 10 of which were penalties. I think he ended up as Bray Wanderers second top scorer
from penalties. Lovely.
Yeah, had a mad season, and ironically, the only goal that he scored from open play was against Wexford. But they've made a lot of noise, so that'll be a good opening test to see. And again, a team that, you know, they were pushing for the playoffs last season, just missed out in the last game of the season to Treaty. So that'll be a really good litmus test of where both of those squads are, and looking ahead to the season.
And for Treaty, we all knew it was coming down the pipeline. Doesn't seem to be one that was picked out of the hat. I think this one may have been pre-arranged, but Treaty and I have Cork City away and Turner's Cross, and the return of the Munster Derby. The real Munster Derby, I suppose. The fake Munster Derby was Kerry for a while. And that's obviously a great crack on it. No offence to Kerry at all. We have lots of friends at Kerry. But that would be a big one for Treaty, because the last time Cork were back, and people seem to forget it when they're commenting on my TikTok saying Cork's going to hammer ye. Last time Cork were down in the first division, which was 2024, they didn't beat Treaty. Treaty also didn't beat Cork, but they were the only team that Cork didn't beat. They drew every time. I think they had 0-0 and 1-1s after that. Lee Devitt crucial in some of them. So I don't think people are, overestimating Treaty against Cork. I think that might be a bit of crap. Yeah,
actually, I commentated that 2024 game. It was the one towards the end of the season. I was thinking about 3 or 4 games left. City were already champions. But yeah, we missed Lee Devitt's goal. And we can blame
commentators curse, honestly. Everyone missing everyone goals, to be honest.
You can blame Aaron Howie because he cut to a replay. To be fair to him,
he's always to blame. I blame him for everything.
There was a nothing throw in on the far side, and Lee Devitt had just had a shot from distance in the opening 2 minutes of the game. So he was like, "Yeah, cool, we'll show a replay of that chance." And then we're watching the replay, and next we just hear, "Yeah, what?" We look up and see the ball in the back of the net. So that was that was an interesting one. But yeah, you know, Treaty always just gave the top team in the division a scare, apart from that game in August against Dundalk that we'll forget about.
I know what I'm talking about there.
But the other 3 games against Dundalk last season there was a couple of draws.
All of them draws.
Yeah, all of them draws. So
a few last minute winners. Mark Walsh, Owen Martin, Lee Devitt coming out of the woodwork. All very fun, I must say.
Yeah. If you're a league leader, underestimate Treaty at your peril.
Yeah, definitely not. And just to kind of close off, Alan, tell me, what game are you most excited for this season? Which player are you most excited for this season? And who do you think is going to get all those goals for Cobh this season?
Game I'm looking forward to most this season. I mean, it's got to be the Cork derbies. It's got to be City versus Cobh. That's going to be fun. And especially since Cobh have stepped up the level, there's definitely the feeling that they're not just a little brother anymore. They are now on, a bit more of an equal footing. So that's gonna be tasty. That's gonna be a feisty one. I'm looking forward to those. In terms of the players that I'm most looking forward to see, I'm looking forward to see Dylan McGlade actually. He's re-signed. I think he was a huge re-signing. He came in, I think it was from Brunswick City, who were in Australia's second tier, and came in quite late in the season, but just looks electric. And now with a full pre-season behind him, a full, fitness, and a chance to sort of really get up to the pace of the league. I mean, the way that he just glides past defenders is magical to watch. So I think he's going to have a really, really good season, and I'm looking forward to watching him. In terms of where the goals are going to come from, it's got to be Wilson Waweru. I think everyone's excited to see him back. I know I waxed lyrical about him there a little while ago, but he was here in 2023, hit double figures for the season along with Jack Doherty that year. It was the first time in over a decade that a Cobh player had hit double figures for a year. So yeah, I think he's hopefully going to have a really good season. He's only 24, still a young fella, so hopefully he's going to have a few good seasons in St. Coleman's Park.
Yeah, it's looking to be a very exciting, a lot of water going under the bridge between now and the season as well in terms of signings, and I'm sure we'll keep up to date with those for now. And I hope Cobh have a great season, not against Treaty, and maybe we'll see towards the end of the season as well. Maybe it might be another playoff. But for now, Alan, give a shout out to your TikTok and a few bits that you're doing on social media so people can go follow you as well.
Yeah, my TikTok is at AOB273, and over on Instagram it's at SuperSubSports. So, if you like to see some behind the scenes content of match day commentaries and stuff, then maybe give us a follow there. Yeah, and if not, that's okay too. I understand.
No, everyone has to follow me. We're not allowed to listen to podcasts. We haven't followed.
So I hope you enjoyed this quite long episode with Alan about Cobh and Treaty's seasons and their off seasons and what's ahead for them both. Please give Alan a follow on social media because he does amazing content and absolutely deserves it. This was his first ever podcast appearance and I think he did absolutely superb. So that's it for episode 1 of the new era, if you will. I really hope you enjoyed. Let me know who you want next. Might be a solo episode, and my next episode will actually be in the big smoke, as they say in the United States. I'm heading there for a few months. So let me know, maybe it'll be someone from over there. But for now, maybe the first and last episode of January, maybe there might be one more before the season starts. But until then, we'll see you when the season starts perhaps. But for now, thanks so much for listening and we'll speak to you all soon. Bye.